Welcome back to the Healing Voice Podcast. My name is Lance Howard, and I'd like to welcome you to Season 8, Episode 2, titled Love and Truth, Part 2. In this discussion with my good friend Dennis Smith, we continue diving into the reality of love and truth. We can learn how to perceive reality as it is and why it is easy for us to miss reality as it is. Empathy is the doorway to love. Truth is the foundation of facts and how to be examples of true love. Thank you for listening. We went pretty fast and deep in part 1, love and truth, you know? It's like, what is love? What is truth? And spirituality, religion, philosophers have been trying to have those discussions for ages. So for us to have the audacity to even try.
Yeah, it's a deep topic. It is something that has been debated for a very long time by way greater minds. But it's worth talking about.
It is. I ran into this little short video on Instagram, and I know I have the link. I'm going to remember to put the link in the description of this video. It's an Instagram link to a short video that's like 2 minutes long that explains essentially indigenous philosophy and like colonial philosophy and shows kind of how those two worlds diverge and go in very different directions. And that stood out to me as so important, such an important part of this conversation, because when we're trying to define anything, one of the things that we talked a little bit about last time was the nature of the matrix, the false reality.
Right.
Which comes in so many different forms and shapes. And there's not just one matrix, there's matrix upon matrix. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. A family unit can have its own matrix within the larger matrix of a
society or a culture or a community.
That's it.
Yep.
So on and so forth. Right. Anyway, so this video had a very interesting way of talking about at least two types of matrices being the indigenous way of thinking about life and kind of its overall connectedness and unity, and the colonial way of seeing things, which is a bit more divisive and competitive in nature.
Right. That's interesting. I'd like to see that video.
Yeah. I ran into it yesterday, and I did save the link, so I'll make sure to put that up for everyone to see. But as we talk about love and truth, the reason why I'm bringing up this video is we're not just trying to define terms, we're defining perspectives as well. We're defining the vantage point or viewpoint that people stand from and see the world.
Right.
So, and the reason why we're attempting to do that is so we all have a closer understanding of how it is that truth is the overarching definer of all that is. Meaning, I have a viewpoint and a vantage point, meaning I may have my truth, but I'm still just one corner. I'm one perspective. Like if my back is to a wall and I'm in a corner, I'm just one perspective of everything that's happening.
Right.
Is there a way for me to get to the point where I can see from the viewpoint of everything that's happening and look back at my corner? We're trying to reverse the roles.
Right.
It's a big undertaking, but I believe it is part of the sacred nature and birthright of being human, that we come into the world maybe having a small vantage point and looking outward. Can we put ourselves on the outward end and turn around and see back to that small vantage point?
And so it sounds like, in a nutshell, what you're describing is empathy. Can we abandon our perspective and step into the perspective of others, looking back on our perspective to see whether or not it's accurate or how accurate it is? Is that what you're saying? Or?
Yeah, and it even seems like when we do look back, we are automatically saying my perspective or that vantage point. My vantage point is inaccurate, plain and simple, because it comes from such a small, it comes from a small place. It comes from a small corner. To be really specific, my vantage point or my truth is me in my ego form.
Got you.
So when I step out of my vantage point or my corner and take on a broader view and can look back at my corner and see other people's corners as well, I've expanded. I've become consciously aware of my true conscious awareness, because now I can see so much more than my ego self will allow me to see. You brought up the word empathy, and that is what I would say empathy is a characteristic of love.
Yeah, you can't have love without empathy.
Can't.
I mean, if my perspective is all that there is, I would say that more resembles pride than love. And the first step to loving someone, which I know we defined or at least got into what love is a little bit last time, which I'm hoping we can dive a little deeper into that. But the whole idea of love is being able to step outside of my wants, needs, and desires and facilitate support or help or whatever this other person, this other perspective needs in the moment. That's essentially what love is this idea of denying self and helping or supporting another to a degree. You give so much to this thing that isn't necessarily you, it's outside of you, that it's almost become a part of you in some way, because you recognize and are able to become consciously aware that you're able to become consciously aware of another, or another perspective, another person, another story. So it does sound like empathy is almost the doorway to love. You can't get into love without first being empathetic for others.
Yeah, it is something like that for sure. In part 1, you read 1 Corinthians like 3-4 or something like that.
Yeah.
And
I got it right here. It says, "Though I speak with the tongue of men and angels and have not love, I have become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, and I have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profits me nothing." So essentially it's saying I can have all these things, I can have all these gifts, I can do all these acts of sacrifice, but if it's not met with love, it means nothing. Verse 4, "Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not vaunt itself. Love is not puffed up. It does not behave itself unseemingly. It seeks not her own way. It is not easily provoked. It thinks no evil. Rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never fails."
yeah, okay. Yeah. And I remember us saying, I said something like, as soon as you started to read at verse 4, love is patient, or love suffers long, love is kind. My instant thought was, oh, it sounds like a person. And so our conclusion was, yeah, it's definitely personifying love.
Right.
As a being, as a person,
Right.
And that makes sense. All the ancient wisdom scriptures are saying God is love. And So that's how we connected. Well, if it should be clear, we're at about 11 minutes or so into this talk right now, and even in 11 minutes, we've already started to talk about truth, and the connection to love is just like the next heartbeat. Like in this conversation, somehow love and truth are so connected. You can't really talk about, you definitely can't, it seems to me that you can't talk about truth if you don't address love. And something about love also requires us to address the truth.
I see how you're arriving at that conclusion. But tie it together for people who might be listening, who might not have arrived at that same point. When you say that it's hard to talk about truth without speaking on love and vice versa, earlier we mentioned that empathy, or this idea of gaining new perspective, seeking capital T, the truth,
Right.
is almost the doorway to empathy. And then we moved on and said we can't have empathy. We can't have love without empathy.
Yeah, exactly. And that so, empathy is some part of love, some characteristic of love.
And so you're essentially saying you can't have true love without truth.
I guess that seems to be true if I think about it like a math equation.
That's how my brain works. It's very analytical, like A plus B equals something.
Right. Yeah, we started off talking about the small perspective and needing to be able to gain the larger perspective, and that the larger perspective calls us to empathy or calls us to love, and that's the simplest way I could boil it down.
So let me ask this. I've seen a few different social media posts, a few different YouTube videos that pretty much detail this conversation of truth as a subjective reality. Everyone has their own truth. Truth is subjective, yada, yada, yada. Do you think that the error in understanding what truth is has taken us to a place where we're almost a culture devoid of true love? I mean, we know over 50% of marriages end in divorce. Culturally speaking, the family has broken down in Western culture to where it's no longer the thing that sustains the culture itself.
Holds the culture together.
And so do you feel like our misinterpretation of truth is what got us to the point to where we can't even understand love?
Is our misinterpretation of truth the reason why we can't understand love? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. My mind just went in 3 different directions about it, but I think the answer is yes. And I would say yes because, remember we started with John 8 at 31 and 32, and it somewhere in that it said the truth will set you free.
Yep, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. If you continue in my words, then are you are my disciple. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's John 8:32.
Right. What I think the ancient scriptures, the ancient wisdom has been saying all this time is that truth and love are synonymous. They're not separate. Now, the problem is, again, there's like this ancient human way of seeing all of this, and then there's this colonial way of seeing all of this. So when we talk about truth, we think truth is simple as a question or a sentence like, that's not true.
Right.
When I say that's not true, most people are hearing not factual. Perhaps, that's not factual, that's not true. But we're talking about something that is beyond facts. when we talk about truth, we're talking about, again, the overarching definer of all that is, meaning it is reality. Truth is reality. It has nothing to do with facts, quote unquote. It has nothing to do with information that you can jot down on a piece of paper and add up with numbers, facts. It's not about that. Truth is not data driven, is what I'm getting at. Truth is reality. It's the reason why we do the things that we do. It's the reason why the earth does the things it does. It's the reason why the stars do the things they do. It's the reason why the galaxies do the things they do. This is truth. Mm-hmm. And
that's the historical perspective of truth. Yeah. Not necessarily our current colonial.
Our current modern, yes. We don't think about truth. To be very accurate, we don't think about truth the way truth is meant to be thought about.
Correct.
So this is how we know we live in a matrix. A matrix upon matrices is what we think is quote unquote good isn't even actually good. Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're always up against what the world is telling us and what is actually real. Yeah. And again, the ancient wisdom is even saying that to us. It's saying you've got to be renewed in your mind. Mm-hmm. Like the world is telling you to see things a certain way, but the true you, the true essence and heart of you is capable of far better or greater expressions of oneself than the way the world is saying you should express yourself. Yeah. Truth and love, they are synonymous because what? Well, I think we hit on a lot of it in part 1, but I think we're going to hit on more of it in part 2. We're just barely starting to scratch the surface. Mm-hmm. One thing that I thought about over this week after part 1 was this. Stop saying my truth and authentically acknowledge your feelings.
Yeah. Yes.
So how would I say that another way? What do you think? Or is there a more clear way to say it?
Yeah. Yeah. My truth is the definition of an opinion. I mean, that's the shortest way that I could arrive at what you're saying. My truth is the definition of opinion.
Right. Because, my opinion. Yeah.
Well, you don't even have to say my opinion. My truth means something. Mm-hmm. That means it's a truth that's specific to me. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially an opinion.
Right.
So anytime you put my in front of truth, it's automatically opinion.
Right.
If you have to use the term my. You can just say truth if it's not an opinion, and then there's some fact checking that might have to happen. And I'm already running into a wall as far as my own perception of truth, because over this week, this is what I came up with. And I heard this somewhere, but it essentially goes something like, truth is fact, and facts are independently verifiable.
Okay.
So there's really no such thing as my truth unless it's an opinion. And what I hear you saying today is, it's not even that truth is fact. Truth is this overarching theme that makes facts possible.
Right. Yep.
And so facts are built on the foundation of truth.
Yes.
And you won't even really know. Well, I was going to say you won't even really know what truth is unless you can corroborate the facts, but I don't know that that's necessarily accurate. What do you think?
Hold on, I'm still stuck on you said facts are built on the foundation of truth or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just stick with that because I feel like the other question's going to divert us a little bit.
Sure.
Facts are built on the foundation of truth. That is a very good statement. I think that is a very accurate statement. My truth is ego's opinion because the my that is speaking is the ego of the person. When
let's do something real quick and hold that thought. What is an ego even? Like, and how is
the
ego separate from a person?
The ego is, one way of saying the ego is the not self. Or the shadow, or the false identity, or the character or mask that a person is wearing, whether they know they're wearing it or not. Ego is fake, but it presents itself like it's real.
Okay.
So if a person has to say my truth, if they even have to say my, it's instantly ego. The sentence is my truth. If they have to say my truth, you instantly know it's the ego. Ego loves opinions. Ego loves to be opinionated is a better way to say that.
Mm-hmm.
When a person is speaking from their true I amness, they don't have to try to clarify if the truth is theirs or not. You know, like,
right. It's just the truth.
It's just the truth. Mm-hmm. It's not about it being yours. Who are you to try to? Who are you to try to quarantine the truth within your power? You are ego. That's what you're acting out as. You are the ego. The ego is the only reason to have that need. And the more we talk about it, the more it reveals itself, because even the need is still ego, right? Mm-hmm. Even to have a need to protect or to prove or whatever it is you're trying to do by saying my truth, you're in your ego. Got to step outside of that and just be able to simply say what the truth is. The truth is, boom. And I don't have to say my truth if I just will. Yeah, I don't have to say my truth unless I have a problem. That's what it really is, you know. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have a problem if you have to say my truth. My equals ego, and like you were saying, truth in that case is just an opinion. Mm-hmm. There could be a point, though, where you speak in a quantum language and you realize that the word my is tied to I amness.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure if you would still say my truth at that point or not, but it's just the English language that we're dealing with as a person who likes to look at ancient languages. I just see the struggle in how we speak in English, you know. But I can see that when we read John 8:31-32, he said, "You will be my disciples," and "my word," and all these types of things. Mm-hmm. It looks and sounds a certain way in English that in the poetic nature of the ancient language, it doesn't come across that way. His my is definitely tied to I amness, which he knows is the overarching definer of everything that is. So he's not just saying, look, I'm a man walking this earth and these are my ways and this is my word. He's not speaking that way.
Right.
He's saying, I am so sure of the reality of things and you can be too. And we are total peers in how we can have this conversation. And my word is your word too. And my ways can be your ways too. Just like we read last week from Matthew 5:46-48, it ended up saying, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, which is another idea of, look, we can share in this great capacity together. It's not Father's perfection. Father is allowing us all to step into perfection.
Right. And it's by acknowledging that his truth, that his word is truth, and continuing in that, being his disciples. Truth sets us free. Freedom somehow leads to perfection, because now we're not living in the matrix, we're walking in what we were designed to walk in, which is this overarching theme of the truth.
Yeah, the truth.
The foundation of everything.
Because a few seconds ago you said his truth and his something else. And again, trying to get back to that quantum language. In modern English, we say his truth, his word, his perfection. But in quantum language, it is truth. It is word. It is perfection.
Right.
It doesn't belong to anyone.
Right. And there's only one.
There's only one.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's only one truth.
And this is how we
one
get
word,
to
one perfection.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's how we get to love. We understand that everyone plays a role in this, because remember last week we said I amness, or conscious awareness, is the only thing that's happening. That's to say there's only the one thing here. We have the appearance of separation, that you and me and them and they and him and her and up and down. It appears like everything's all separated, but that's not truth. That's the matrix.
Right.
And the appearance of separation is fine, because the point is to understand how love works, and it's all about diversity then. There has to be diversity for love to work.
Because that's the definition of love, essentially. It's funny you say that. I have a short definition of love that I've used for a long time. And I've never really, I don't know if I've ever really talked to anybody about this, maybe you a while back, but I've always seen the short definition of love as unity in diversity. Right? And so when we read 1 Corinthians 13 and it tells you the properties of love, first off, you couldn't have those properties without conflict, right? You couldn't be patient unless there was an expanse of time, right? You couldn't you couldn't be kind unless there was something else to be, right? And so it almost seems like just like the definition of love is a set of actions or a state of being within diversity, and that state of those set of actions or that state of being within diversity always points towards unity.
Right.
Always.
Right. Yeah.
And so I wonder, like, I guess this is definitely a heavy topic, and I can see how it all connects. And this is my question and my struggle. How do we communicate this or verbalize these heavily debated topics in a way that's clear and concise? How do I teach this to my kids? You know, how do I share this with the next generation in a way that's simple enough to understand, easy enough to replicate, to live by? Is it something I can even do?
That's what this podcast is about. That's why we're having the conversation. And that is the answer, is just the conversation. No one, I say no one, few people are talking about it. Few people can talk about love and still feel loving at the end of the conversation. And even more so, few people talk about truth and still feel loving and truthful at the end of the conversation.
That's real talk.
So we need leaders who are able to have the conversation and then be the perfect example, which is, it doesn't matter how much diversity comes up in this conversation, which means we're going to get a little uncomfortable. Can we remain respectful, honoring one another, loving one another through the whole thing, and come to a peaceful resolution? That takes some That takes real leadership. When I say leadership, I'm not talking about politics or politicians or governments or agencies or bureaus or corporations. That's not leadership. I'm talking about people who are willing to sacrifice themselves for the good of others.
Sacrifice their truth.
Sacrifice their truth. Yes, they've got to be able to recognize their own ego. And that's how they, again, now they're not stuck in their small corner. They can get out of their corner and turn around and see everything and everyone else. Now they have empathy because they go, oh, yep, I remember I know what it's like to be stuck in that corner. I know what it is to have a small perspective. And I know what helped me grow out of that small mindedness that I had. So I may be able to help and support others get out of small-mindedness also. I can't make them come, but I can tell them about my experience, which may inspire them to take a step out of their corner and then another step out. This is just what I'm saying or describing now is just an example of how true leadership may try to go about that. It's just a conversation, and it has to happen. It's not a conversation that we can ignore. It's not. Yeah, it really needs to be a constant conversation.
Yeah.
With real deep talk like what we're having here, and addressing things from an ancient viewpoint and all of that. Because if we try to have this conversation still based in our modern English colonialism, that matrix will never touch it.
100%. Having a conversation like this from within the matrix is going to end in war. Whether it's verbal conflict or war on a national global scale, we can't address truth within the matrix. Like, we can't talk about truth or love or any of these topics that are weighty or super deep. We can't address or have a conversation about these things from the mindset of I'm in the matrix.
Right.
And it sounds like, honestly, not even speaking spiritually, it sounds like there's a bunch of people on this whole idea of red pill topics. And for anybody that doesn't know, in the matrix, there's this fundamental idea that you got to take a pill in order to wake up, and usually it's the red pill. Right. And that's kind of been associated with coming out of culture, the way that it's been dictated to us. And it seems like there's a lot of people on this red pill coming out of culture idea, and they're having a lot of good conversations, but they're typically not fundamental conversations like truth and love. It's about dating or how women should be, what is a woman, how men should be. And what we're saying here is, hey, a leader is somebody who can sit down and talk about things like truth and love, these fundamental ideas that support everything that is life, right? It's all of our human interactions. Everything we do is based off these two ideas of truth and love. And so how do we have a conversation about truth and love that gets away from, oh, love is a feeling, or, oh, truth is subjective? How do we actually talk about these things and just let the conversation happen in a way that brings healing, peaceful resolution, all of those things? It's almost like just having the conversation is the most important thing.
It is. And hearing you say all that reminds me that if we can't pinpoint the true self from the not self, the true reality from the fake reality or the matrix, if we can't identify the ego versus who I really am, if we can't identify these two worlds that we're kind of dealing with, essentially that's the breakdown of the communication. Needs us to be able to do that. We have to be able to sit with people and be able to identify the ego, because the ego is what is muddying the water of truth and love. So if we can identify ego, everyone can instantly jump to love really quickly, at least in a way of understanding. meaning they can be able to perceive what truth and love actually is, but they first must know what is standing in the way of them seeing it accurately or experiencing it fully. Truth and love, experiencing fully and seeing accurately, truth and love. It's the ego.
It's interesting that you said that, because even in this conversation, you've mentioned ego a few times, and you've even kind of told me what ego is, but I'm really curious to see what ego is from a personal perspective. Like, I don't know that I've yet identified the separation between who Dennis is and who Dennis's ego is. Are they two separate entities? Is it one thing? How do I know? I think it would be helpful just to wrap my mind and around that, because what you said is powerful. In order to have this conversation, we have to be able to identify ego, and we have to be able to separate the two things between true self and our ego. And maybe that's just a good starting point, because like I said, we mentioned it before, these are heavily debated topics, and it doesn't seem like there's a conclusion either way. And so I'm hoping that in us doing this, we could provide some sort of, I don't want to say conclusion, because that would make the conversation not necessary, but at least some sort of something to grasp onto, something to hold on to in the journey of trying to understand truth and love. Does that make sense at all? So it just sounds like recognizing ego is probably super important if we're going to continue to talk about this truth and love.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Understanding ego. One thing I could definitely say about ego immediately is that if you're having any negative feeling, that's the ego. If it feels anxious, depressive, angering, frustrating, doubtful, pessimistic, negative, anything that does not inspire you but brings about some version of fear, that whole list of feelings and emotions I just made my way through about negativity, pessimism, anxiety, depression, I'm going to put all those under one umbrella called fear. Yeah, so if you feel any of that negative, fearful stuff, that's the ego. So if in a conversation you start feeling defensive or that you need to shut somebody down, that's the ego. And this is where we have to be able to address ego in this way. People may not understand, but this is it's in the story of Genesis with Adam and Eve, that when the serpent came to Eve, what's really happening, and I'm just going to say it really quickly, I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but Adam and Eve and the serpent represent parts of the human psyche. We've got consciousness, we've got awareness, and we've got the ego. That is Adam and Eve and the serpent. So the serpent is another term for our modern word ego. Everyone needs to know that they have an ego, and that the ego is always there putting in doubtful ideas or negative feelings, or like that is what the ego does. That is what the serpent does, causing doubt, causing you to think you and others are smaller and weaker than you actually are. That is the ego. What the ego gets out of that is your power. That's what the ego gets out of it. Conscious awareness is true power, and ego's job is to try to steal that power from the person. And as long as they don't realize how powerful that they truly are, then ego is sitting on the throne of their life, so to speak.
Man, that's a bunch of fathoms deep right there, bro.
Did we just jump off the deep end?
Yeah.
To the deep end.
To the deep end. I'm swimming for a life raft right now, trying to wrap my mind around that.
And also in this conversation, unity and diversity as a way of describing love. Remember, also in Genesis, it says in the beginning, God created everything. And as God, conscious awareness, the great I am, was creating everything, God kept saying, it is good, it is good, it is good. Meaning, the more diverse it got, there was no fear. It was good. More diversity, it is good. More diversity, it is good. More diversity, it is good, you know?
Yeah.
And again, the reason why I bring that up is because in this diverse experience we're calling life, our modern world is telling us that there's a problem when people don't act a certain way or look a certain way or ascribe or prescribe to the same things we do. Instead of us saying it is good, which is the empathetic, loving way, we get defensive and feel insecure and all these things.
Yeah.
But the great I am is saying all this diversity is good. It doesn't mean there's not trouble and confusion and things, but the trouble and confusion is a human issue. It's not a God issue. It's not a conscious awareness issue.
Right.
It's humans twisting things.
It's an ego thing.
By how they believe, and that's the ego.
Okay.
I'm excited about. So I have another book that's coming up soon. It's still in its edit phase. It's been through 3 rounds of edits so far, but it's going to need at least 1 more round of editing. And it's called The Shadow of the Self, and it is all about the ego.
Ooh, I can't wait till that one comes out, honestly.
The shadow of the self. That is to say, okay, every person walks down the street, and when the sun hits you, a shadow is cast. And have you ever seen a video or, I don't know, experienced a baby that notices their shadow for the first time and how they freak out about it? And it's interesting how telling life can be, that a child recognizes a person is following them and it freaks them out. That's the shadow of the self. The shadow is not the self, but it is a form casted from the self. And we all have the shadow of the self. We all have the self and we all have the shadow, and that shadow is the ego. So in this book, I believe it's 16 chapters long, and the first half of the book is talking about the nature of the ego in everything from relationships, attachment styles, our belief systems. It covers death. It covers everything. And then the last 8 chapters talk about the nature of love and I amness, so that hopefully we have enough information from this book to not miss ego, but we also have enough information not to miss love, because they're both kind of mysterious. The ego is mysterious, and I would say love is mysterious too, in that they're both happening all the time without our recognizing it.
They're constants.
Oh. In this 3-dimensional life experience, ego is, constantly there, trying to trick us into believing false things. I can't honestly say if the ego is that smart. It's portrayed to have that kind of intelligence in ancient stories, right? But more so, the loving thing, the God thing, the conscious awareness thing, is that ego is actually being used for our enlightenment, our awakening. You know, every lie that is told through the ego is our opportunity to wake up, is what I'm meaning by that.
Bro, you just blew my mind with the shadow and the book that you're working on right now. That I can't wait till that comes out.
I can't wait for it to come out.
Especially if understanding the ego is is fundamental to living in truth and walking in love, then this book need to get out here quick. Like, people need this, because we are living in a truth deficient world. We're living in a love deficient world.
Right.
And I honestly believe that my purpose, just as a person, is to spread love. So I'm interested to learn what that looks like and to grow into that.
Yeah. Ego is very subtle. Ego is very subtle. And it's not ironic, I guess, that the definition for the ego in ancient Hebrew, linking all the way back to our words devil, Satan, serpent, adversary, is trickster, whisperer of spells and enchantments. The word for the ego goes all the way back to that. And it's part of us.
Let me ask you this, and this might be an answer that I might have to wait on the book to have answered, but I'm just curious if you have something quick on this. When you say that the ego is part of us, and you say that the terminology that is of the word ego, the etymology links all the way back to, things like enchanter or whisperer or deceiver. I forget what other words you use. But is it safe to say that the ego is what the scriptures describe as our sin nature?
Oh, yeah. That is totally it. That is totally it. That is totally it. And when we come into the New Testament of the scripture and Paul starts talking about the old man or the old nature, that's the shadow. That's who you thought you were while you were missing the mark over and over again, doing whatever you thought you wanted to be doing. That, it's called quote unquote sin. That was you operating as your ego nonstop, only doing what? Only doing that which put you on a pedestal or on a throne. You were willing to take advantage and to be deceitful and to lie and to cheat and to steal. All the things the Ten Commandments say not to do, that's what you were continually doing. That's the ego. So Ten Commandments again, it's just another opportunity for us to know the difference between love and the not self, or true reality and false reality.
The real me and the ego. So that, oh man, this is deep, bro. I'm excited to actually jump into that, because once we can get the ego situated and dealt with in its place and bring a distinction between the real self and the ego, I understand what you're saying. I think truth and love get a lot more clear.
Right.
And maybe that's the step we're missing. And why is truth and love so debated? Why can't anybody land on what this is? And it's something that's been around forever. Right. Well, maybe because we haven't dealt with the ego yet.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah. That... And you keep referring to the debate or debates about love and truth. And even that sentence is telling us a lot, because only the ego wants to debate.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not even a debate. If I have to say my truth, that's me instantly debating.
Right.
And as we already said earlier in this podcast, if my has to be the first thing about truth, then it's ego. There is a way to just get to the truth and get to true love.
Right.
We can't get there without vulnerable honesty. And that's what addressing the ego is about, is that whoever you are that wants to talk about your truth and wants to be defensive and debating and arguing and always wants to be right, You cannot get to the reality of truth and love until you're able to ask yourself, why must I feel the way I feel and act the way I act and treat people the way I treat people? Why must I always be right? So now we're starting to get into vulnerability and the ego. The only way to quiet my ego and to shut it down is to be able to realize ego and I have been in league together as a team. And ego wreaks havoc. It doesn't do anything good. So that therefore means in some way, shape, or form, I've been a havoc wreaker. And I've got to be able to sit down with myself and understand the reasons why. And this is what, I enjoy writing about, talking about, coaching about. This is what the healing voice is about. So now we're getting into healing. Why do I do what I do? Oh, I had these experiences, these traumas, these dramas, and so I'm defensive, I'm angry, I have these deep underlying dark emotions that need to be dealt with. This is what I need to deal with is another way of saying I'm ripe, primed, ready for healing. I'm ripe, primed, ready for recovery. So now I can trust the nature of who I am. Now we start hitting love. We start hitting truth. Realizing that no one in the world can offer the thing that I'm looking for. We can go deep into this, but just very quickly because we're running out of time. We can go deeply into this. I need to shut down my ego, number one. Number two, no one in the world can offer me what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone to continually show me how worthy I am. I think that's kind of it. And give me the proper space and safety that I need to feel connected and that I belong and the security. No one can constantly do that for any one of us. And if there's for no other reason that they can't, it's because they will one day die. So even if we imagine, like, oh, but so-and-so's always been there for me, they won't always be there for you.
Right.
So get it through your head that no one can continually do that for you. It only falls on you. You are the person who is with you to the day you die.
Right.
No one else is. No one else can be.
Wow. So we're looking, I don't mean to interrupt, but it sounds to me like you're saying we're looking for our answers in all the wrong places. We're looking outside of ourselves for something that can only come from within.
Yes, looking outside of ourselves is exactly what the ego wants to keep us doing. That is it. Now we're ready to jump into part 3 because that statement right there, the ancient wisdom, ancient scripture is saying the kingdom, the power, the authority, the connection, the belonging is within you. Luke chapter 17, 20 and 21. It's that simple. But our matrix, our egos, are like, no, it's in relationships, it's in cars, it's in career, it's in money, it's in, raising a family, it's in retirement, I don't know, it's in vacationing often, it's in all these other things. But none of those other things will be there with you till the day you die.
Oh, man. So let me just make sure I'm understanding you correctly. What you're saying is that the connection to myself, my true self,
yes,
is the one and only thing that I need in this world. A true connection to my true self. And as long as I can have that, I essentially have a true connection to the great I am.
The great I am, yep.
I have a relationship with God or with the great I am as soon as I have a relationship with my true self.
That's it.
And stop living in the ego.
Yes. And we got to be careful because the ego wants you to think you have been true to yourself. which is why you say this stuff about my truth.
Right.
You think you're being true to yourself, but you're being true to your ego.
Right.
This is why the ego is the shadow. It's shaped like you, walks like you, but it's not really you. They're so close. They're so close. And this is why the discussion is about love and truth, because your true self is totally enveloped and is comprised of and flows from and gives love and is willing and open to accept and be like totally wrapped up and entangled with the truth. But the shadow self isn't all wrapped up in love and truth. It's wrapped up in defensiveness and hatred and division and being right all the time and all these other things. That's how you can see the ego, all the negativity that you thought is you and your truth. But it's negative, it's dark, it's scared, it won't leave people alone, you know, it's anxious or it's avoidant or all these,
all the negative traits of human nature.
All the negative traits of human nature. And you're saying, or our culture has made it okay for us to equate all that negativity with who we truly are. Like, I'm just being me. All right, well, you're actually allowing the ego, you've become one with your ego.
Yeah. Bro, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know that I've ever heard the statement, I'm just being me, separate from an offense caused by that person. Does that make sense? It always seems like the people who talk like that, oh, I'm just being me, or do you, boo-boo, or YOLO, you know what I'm saying? Like, it always seems like that's an excuse for an offense, or it's an excuse to do something you know you shouldn't be doing. Like, if somebody did that to you, you wouldn't like it. But I'm just being me, like it's a way or a statement or a phrase that we use to kind of keep someone else at bay when we know we've just wronged them. We know what we did isn't right.
Right.
And it's like I'm just being me. People get on my nerves, bro. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie.
The I'm just being me is just, it's similar to the saying, this is just my truth. I'm just being me. It's the same. It's, what is the term I'm looking for? It's a way to not take responsibility for what's really happening. Like if someone's being a real jerk and oh, I'm just telling the truth.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just a Leo. I'm just a Sagittarius. So just being me.
They start using truth or being themselves as a scapegoat for bad behavior that they wouldn't want anyone else to do to them. But since I'm just being me, so it's okay that I do it to you.
Justification for bad behavior.
It's always backwards, you know, like that. It's always inaccurate. It's not the truth. It's a lie, and that's the ego.
Well, man, I'm super excited to get into this ego talk. I know we've been going. What's our time like?
We're at about an hour, so yeah, it's time to put this to an end. I think that this is a good stopping point.
Yeah.
And
well, real quick before we end, did you want to talk about? I know you have a book, the identity process.
The identity process.
That's out now. I went through it just recently for maybe the second or third time, and I gotta say it was more refreshing this time than it was the first two times. So anybody out there listening, if you haven't gone through the identity process, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, you got to get it. Yeah,
the identity process, the link will be in the description, and it's on Amazon and Audible as well. It essentially just takes you through a process to coming to a conclusion with these two questions. Who am I and what am I here to do? So it just sets you up with identity and purpose. And again, the title is the identity process. It's a great place to start if you feel like you just don't know what you're doing or why you're doing what you're doing, or you're not satisfied or haven't been happy or feel like you haven't really chased your dreams appropriately, or you're just ready for change. It's a good book to have.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well,
think that's it for now. Thanks for listening to the Healing Voice podcast. The link to the Instagram video I mentioned at the beginning of this episode is in the description. I invite you to try the identity process. Get to know the answers to these questions. Who am I? What am I here to do? And how will I do it? Go to the website to make your initial appointment. You can find the book on Amazon. The link is in the description. THV is a donation-based service that believes in sacred economics, that true value is found in the expression of your heart. Time, attention, and energy are true currency. When someone serves from the heart, no dollar amount can be placed on their service. Your donation makes THV possible. Your support helps others who can't afford THV's one-on-one coaching. I'll leave the links in the description. Thanks for listening. Tell someone about THV today.